Hey guys, welcome to my custom computing YouTube channel. After a few client builds that I've done, I've decided to take this a little bit more seriously and do a little bit more professional documentation, both on the web and on YouTube. So I'm changing a few things about my display of how I do my videos, and I hope you guys enjoy it. This is an update to the reanimation client build 2. uh, I went over to extreme overclocking, and on the forum there was some great suggestions regarding my rig. One of the suggestions was the fans. I currently have them pushing out the front, going through the radiator, and a push-pull config and coming out of the front. This was a positive airflow inside the case, and so some of the people there suggested that I switch that and make the fans blow through the case and out the back. They also suggested that I put in a fill port. So in order for me to justify taking this all apart and redoing the fan direction as well as some other mods, I was trying to figure out where I would put the fill port. And there's a couple of places on uh, this case that you can put it. I At this point I'm waiting for the parts to come in and then looking at where the best place for the fill port would be. The other suggestion that I had was the rotation of the pump. The reason why it's angled in such this way is because uh, the drain valve is going out the side, and in order for me to be able to access the drain valve, I had to tilt it slightly, uh, as well as leave it off the ground a little bit. We're going to change that in this mod, as well as install um, the fill port. Now, this isn't a necessary mod, and to be honest, after completing it, it was a lot of work, and I highly do not suggest doing this type of mod after you've already planned out your rig. Planning a loop is always very important, especially in a small, mid-sized case like this. You've really got to focus on the sizing and the spacing and all the measurements that go into it. As you can see here, I incorporated a DVD into my case because I didn't want to lose any possible clients due to the fact that it didn't have a $15 DVD writer. With that said, I had to measure the reservoir as well as the pump and all the fittings to make it work. Now that I'm putting in a fill port, I'm trying to find out the best location as to where I can do it without actually changing the aesthetics of the computer. Now, one of the thoughts was I was going to do it out the front because I thought that'd be kind of neat and it'd be a feature. But after I received the part, I decided that I'm going to hide it about the back, behind the back panel. So basically, you'd have to take off the back panel, unscrew one of the tops, and go ahead and fill it. You really only do this once, maybe twice in a build's life, so it wasn't that imperative. After I received the parts that I got from Dad's Mode, I received two fill ports. One was a Bits Power G 1/4 fitting, and the other was it still was a G 1/4 fitting, but it was a bigger outlet. One was chrome and one was just matte black. Currently, the one I have in my hand was the one I ended up deciding to use because it's a lot smaller and I was able to do a lot more with it. The problem with the big glossy black uh, fitting was really in a small form case such as this, in order to have something that big, it would really stand out. And the purpose of this case is aesthetics as well as functionality. So a fill port shouldn't be one of the main things that sticks out on a case, as it's rarely used. As I said, if once, maybe twice in a build's lifetime. The usage options for the smaller bits power fill port were a lot more applicable. And at first I thought it would be pretty interesting to do it on the front or at the top of the case, have it coming down, but that would reveal too much tube as well as coming out and impeding the view. In order for me to use this fill port, I was going to have to move the reservoir down significantly um, in order to put a 90-degree fitting on top of the reservoir. This posed some issues. Working in a small case, I definitely do not recommend trying to do too much. There isn't a lot of room, and it's once you start putting the pieces together, it gets very, very difficult to maneuver, and especially when you've connected three or maybe even four tubes to a reservoir that's has to be stuck in place, it becomes extremely hard to maneuver and put the tubing in without bending or ruining everything. The other thing that I was going to be doing was by a suggestion of someone on extreme overclocking was to add um, a corrosive anti-agent and a biotoxin. I've never actually done this before, but it was suggested to me by Mr. Scott on extreme overclocking that I should probably add just about 25 milliliters or so to the distilled water that I have in there in order to make sure that there's no corrosion and no breakdown within the loop. And it's only $10, so I decided I'd go ahead and get it. And you really don't need a lot in a loop this small. Now, one of the reasons why I was so willing to do this fillport mod was because there was quite a few changes that I wanted to make to the current configuration in order to call this a successful build. The first one was the current drain port. The quick disconnect had to be angled. The reason for this was twofold. The original reason was because there are LED ports on the acrylic top to the pump, and in order for me to put the LED at the bottom hole, I would have to have it elevated off of the ground of the case. The second reason why this was angled slightly was because I was mounting it on the side of the case with screws, and in order for me to access the bottom screw, I had to have it elevated slightly in order to screw it in the back. In order to get away with this, I was able to uh, think of different ways of putting the pump and uh, res config in order to make some space up at the top. As you can see right now, I'm draining the loop, and it's fairly difficult for me to snap in the drain port. This will be resolved with the new configuration that I'm going to go with, as well as allowing there to be a fill port, and the drain port will be a lot easier to use. Some of the configurations that I had to think of while doing this with the pump and res config were limited by the location of the graphics card, um, as well as the cables coming out of the power supply. As indicated before, this is a slight budget build. It's not an ultimate build, so I wasn't going for a fully modular power supply, and this limited the ability to have the pump directly on the ground where I would be able to shoot it up into the graphics card without having to use a 90-degree angle. Now, I do like the look of a pump and res config in one. However, for this build, as I said, just because it's such a small tight fit and the angles just weren't suitable, I was not able to lift the res and pump config higher, so I was forced to go back to my original configuration and use a 45-degree angled fitting in order to get to the graphics card without touching the cables coming out of the power supply. Now, while this mod gave me a chance to reverse the flow of the case, the airflow of the case, it also gives me the chance to show a little bit more detail how I was able to create the brackets and mount the radiator as well as the grills. So those brackets that I created are just the little pieces that the grill attaches to. And in order to snap in the grill on top of them, you have to cut out the holes. So there's actual nubs that go into the fan. You have to take those off and drill a hole in order to make space for the screw heads to pop through. Otherwise, this is not going to snap into place at all. So once it's snapped in, I actually screw the sides of it in order to make sure that it's not moving anywhere. But you can see through here that the screw heads are protruding through the holes that I did cut in order for them to keep the mesh flush. And once I have the fan filters in, you won't be able to see any of that anyways. This was also one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this mod, to get a chance to flip the airflow, basically to use the fan filters and reduce the actual dust within the case. You can see now that adding the fan filter actually really does dim the look of the fans, and um, once you have it snapped in, you really can't tell that there's even fans back there until they turn on, and it's you can see the blue LEDs. Once I have the grills in place, there's uh, 2 per grill screws that you have to put in that attach to the actual grill. Those 4 there are the ones that are attaching to the brackets, and then there's also alongside those, there's 2 on the inside, you can't really see them there, that will fasten the grill to the case. All right, guys, I'm going to submit this as video part 1. Hopefully you like it, and get ready for filling the loop in part 2.